Good evening from India, from Bengal. Welcome everybody to our show, to our YouTube channel, Maramia Spiritual Center. As you all know, today we are doing a special episode, and the name of the live session is Bharat on the brink of disaster or redemption? And to talk about this, today our guest is Sri Rajiv Malhotra. Namaskar, Rajiv ji.
Wonderful
Please
to
bring Rajiv ji on the screen.
Namaskar, Maharaj ji. Such a pleasure, such a delight to get to know you.
Thank you. So I'll just briefly introduce Rajiv ji to the audience. See, Rajiv Malhotra had stepped away from an extremely successful career in the IT industry in the US in 1994 to concentrate on what was for him an inner calling, a mission to fulfill. He plunged into the study of civilisations to dig out the truths below the modern narratives. He established the Infinity Foundation to streamline his research and enterprise. Back then, he was a tapassi, a lone warrior who was trying to decolonize our Indian brain so that we would wake up to our own Bharatiya dharmic reality. Today, he spearheads what he calls the Swadeshi indology movement, both in our country and abroad. He has written several books, which include Being Different, Battle for Sanskrit, Breaking India, Sanskrit Untranslatables, and his most recent book, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Power. Artificial intelligence is a field where he had gone back to after so many years. You can visit his website, Rajiv Malhotra Official, where you will get all the details and the links. You may follow his YouTube lectures and interviews. And let me assure you, with him, there is never a dull moment. He speaks very lucidly on very complex subjects and makes them seem very simple and easy to understand, even for the layman. Today, we will take an overview of his works. They all lead up to the present clear reality that we are in. We desperately need to understand our roles and responsibilities in order to survive and even thrive as a civilization. Welcome, Rajiv Malhotra ji. It's a great honor and a privilege for us to be with you. And we are looking forward to a great session.
Yes.
Thank
you very much for a very generous introduction. And I'm really excited. I'm really looking forward because I think you are a clear thinker, to the point, and I love that. So I'm happy to get started.
So, as you know, we are generally, when I talk with people, I talk with Bengalis, and they, like everybody else in India, they have been, or we have all been brainwashed into certain belief systems. Now, let's start with caste, your ideas of caste. You say that the caste system, or the caste structure, or the hierarchy, or the discrimination is a creation of the British. And you say, and it is very different from the Bharatiya concept of varna, jat, and jati. Will you please elaborate on this?
Yeah, I think the word caste is a Portuguese word, casta. So they superimpose their idea of hierarchy, race, which they brought from Europe, and they're looking for something similar. And so they said, okay, this must be the same thing. And they called it the caste system. There's no caste word like that in Sanskrit. It is, if you have a concept, you also have a word for it. So the closest words we have are varna and jati. So let me explain. Varna is not by birth, it is by guna. And guna is by karma. That is clearly mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, that your varna is based on your conduct, your behavior, your past, your tendencies. So the way I would talk about, the way I would discuss varna in a modern situation is, I would say that is your kind of intellectual or occupational potential, your propensity, your tendency, your aptitude. So when you go to when a student is passing some school and want to go for a career choice and college choice, The counselor will do some tests and figure out, are you more into intellectual work, are you more into interpersonal work, are you more athletic work, what, in other words, what are your aptitudes, and then accordingly select a career. Now that doesn't have to be by heritage, because your parents may be one thing and you may be of another kind. So the varna is your tendencies, and there were four forms of capital, which are the four varnas. This is the classification system given to us in our tradition. So the Brahmins were more knowledge workers, intellectual workers, the people who are the scientists, the educators, the teachers, and it doesn't mean that they are superior, because there are many injunctions that Brahmins are not supposed to accumulate wealth and power and all that. That is meant for other varnas. Of course, today the people who call themselves Brahmins are violating this. So they are not really Brahmins. They're just Brahmin by heritage and inherit and ancestry. That's not the true Brahmin. They're not Brahmin by actual conduct and occupation. The true Brahmin, in terms of his conduct and his lifestyle, he is very humble. He's looking for his ideal, and his swadharma is connected with higher pursuits of learning and teaching to the society, and not about accumulating a whole lot of wealth. Another varna is the political capital, the power, the military capital, and that is the kshatriya. So in today's term, the government people are kshatriyas, all the elected officials, all the politicians are kshatriyas, the administrators, IAS type people are kshatriyas, the military, the courts, they are all kshatriyas. That is the job description. So these are people who are not supposed to be in their own business. That is the vaishya, because if it's a conflict of interest. If you are ruling and you are also accumulating your own family wealth, that's a conflict of interest. So there are huge injunctions and restrictions on what each varna can do. This business that they are ruling and they are persecuting people is complete humbug. Because if you look at the tradition, if you want to discuss the varna according to our own tradition, then you have to read. Just like there are limitations on what Brahmin can do, there are huge limitations on what a Kshatriya can do. The Raja is not supposed to impose his faith and religion and his guru and his deity on others. He is supposed to uphold, and it's a pluralistic society. So he's supposed to fund and sponsor the Brahmins to do their work and educate people, so that there is a lot of knowledge in the next generation. So the students are wise and competitive by any global standards. He's supposed to make sure that the military protects the country from borders. He's supposed to make sure there is law and order. And this is a tough job. And he's not supposed to accumulate wealth for himself. So that's the Kshatriya. The Vaishya is the financial person, the person who looks after money, trading, creates wealth, the Vaishya is not supposed to become the king. He's not supposed to get into politics and get him by himself a Rajya Sabha seat or something like that, because he happens to be a billionaire and he can pay money and get into politics or something. He's not supposed to do that. So today's system is corrupted. But if you want to talk about how it was originally, then you have to stick to it. The Shudras are not sort of low people and who are supposed to be slaves and so on. The Shudras have embodied knowledge, musicians, surgeons, artists, large amount of occupations which are held in very high regard today. Sportsmen, athletes. Now is Olympics going on. So people who have embodied the expertise. And this expertise may be passed on, and they learn it, from their tradition. That kind of a varna is the Shudra varna. So these varnas are not in a hierarchy. They say that, okay, now there are verses which talk about the Brahmin came from the head, and the different parts of the Purusha's body became different varnas, and therefore people draw the conclusion that therefore head is higher, feet are lower, therefore there's a hierarchy of power. That's not true. If someone asks me, we want to cut off your feet because that is low, I will tell them to get lost, because I can't afford to lose my feet. Feet are as important to me as my brain. Without the feet, I can't move. I need to be able to move forward. You can also say, while the feet are representative of what's low, you could also say that feet are representative of moving forward, of progressing, of advancing. So the misrepresentation of the metaphor of a body as different parts comprising the different varnas. That misinterpretation has done a lot of mischief. I would say that the right way to interpret this metaphor that the four varnas are like four different parts of the body, the right way to interpret is that they depend on each other, just like the parts of the body depend on each other. Every organ is interconnected with every other organ. You cannot say lungs are inferior, so cut them out because heart can't live. You cannot say that pancreas are no good, throw them out. You can't say liver is no good. I mean, all the organs are interconnected. All the parts of the body are interconnected. Therefore, all the varnas are interconnected, interdependent to make a society healthy, just like the parts of a body have to all be healthy and support each other for the person to be healthy. So I would say the varna system is basically quite different from the hierarchical kind of a caste system. This another concept, different one from this, is jati. Jati is professional continuity through families, because in the absence of a public school system, where all the kids go and learn in the same classroom. The traditional knowledge was you pass the knowledge on from one generation to the next. So if I was born in a home where there are tabla players, I'll from the childhood I will learn to be. I'll have a tendency. I'll have a tendency to learn that. If we are fishermen, then I learned to help my parents with the nets and the cleaning of the boats and all that. And by the time I grow up, I have a tendency to join that profession. There is nothing different than today the billionaires, their children are following the parents' profession. I mean, the Ambanis are following their father's profession. Politicians, their kids are becoming politicians. A lot of families I know are multi-generational army families. Their parents were in the father and they are in the army. So this business of continuing the profession of the parents is true in every society. You find that a lot of people here in Princeton University who are intellectuals and professors and scientists, their parents were similar. They were also professors. So this business of continuity of a parental profession is something you find in every society. So this business of varna and jati, they're two separate concepts. You cannot collapse them and say, okay, caste and hierarchy. That is what I think went wrong. British made it very official through the census. Lord Risley, who was a follower of the racist people, the lot of racists who took Darwin's evolution and applied it to social categories. Darwin didn't say so, but he didn't deny it either. These people turned the evolution into some societies are more evolved, some are less evolved, some races are more evolved, some are less evolved. And they went around creating this whole racism in the 1800s. And Lord Risley was a follower of that group. And he was brought to India to create a census. And the census of India wanted to classify Indians into different categories. And so he came up with this hierarchy. And these people often use a Hindu or a Vedic terminology to do some mischief. They do that a lot. So they came up with this idea that these varnas and jatis are really, they converted it into the idea of caste, and then they came up with this Brahmin and the different varnas, and said that this is a abusive caste system. Every 10 years, there was a census. This went on for 4 or 5 decades, 6 decades, until the early part of the 20th century. During this half century period, approximately, the British solidified a very hierarchical identity among Indians by requiring them to, each leader of a community had to come and say what caste he belongs to. Whether he understood this term, whether he related to it, they would coach him that you belong to this caste, how many people there are and whatnot, so that the classification of Indians according to the British census became as per the caste hierarchy. So they put this framework, they put this grid of caste, requiring people to identify themselves in order to be counted, in order to get social benefits, in order to get political rights. They had to be counted in this census, otherwise you're out of it. And so the Indians started complying with it gradually over time, reluctantly in many cases. And this is how the caste system emerged. Now, a stupid thing was for the Indians to, after independence, to create this caste as a way to classify those who need help more than others. They should have done it on an individual basis. I mean, there should have been a way to figure out whose parents are poor, who needs help, who's got who's underprivileged. Maybe in their village they don't have proper schools, maybe they don't have proper medical facilities and they need help. So those who need help according to some kind of a scale should be given more help. And this has nothing to do with British classification of castes. They should have decolonized the British social sciences. Decolonizing the British social sciences would have changed the future of India had they done it. But these guys, Nehru and all these guys, were trained in British schools and universities, Cambridge and all that. So they brought that category with them, and they thought that they are civilizing India the way the British were trying to civilize India by using these categories to define Indian society and try to create one category against another. This category has been exploited by that category of Indians, and therefore we need to help these people with affirmative action, with quotas and whatnot. The whole mess that Indian society has turned into is, you can understand in this brief version of history that I gave.
Thank you very much, Rajiv ji, for clearly elaborating on this idea of caste and how it is different from the varna and the jati systems, or the parampara, let's say, which I think is more universal. I think there is varna all over the world.
Yes.
Only they don't talk about it. And in relation to this, what would you say about this, the problem of untouchability? For example, even now there are certain areas where Dalits are considered to be untouchables. What is the origin of this concept of Dalit and untouchability? Does it also have anything to do with the European presence here?
So would you say that the COVID quarantine is a system of untouchability? I mean, come on, let's ask. Is the World Health Organization promoting, and the CDC of the United States and all these governments saying that these are laws, and if you are category in this, then you can't be, you have to be isolated and quarantined. Is the modern quarantine system a system of untouchability? I want to ask that. When there was this nuclear meltdown, nuclear power plants meltdown recently in Japan because of a tsunami, all the workers who were contaminated with radioactivity were quarantined. They were quarantined. When you come to United States and they ask you questions, do you have this disease, that, this, have you been to this country, that, and according to their scientific classification, you could pose a threat to other people, you quarantine. So they are untouchable. So this business of untouchability was a sort of a taboo. It became a taboo over a period of time. It is not exactly clear how it started, but maybe many things happened. Some things happened in the Islamic era. All I can tell you is this. We did a project on the history of Indian science and technology, and we produced 13, 14 volumes on that. Some of the volumes were on metallurgy. And we found that the metallurgists who were the leaders of metallurgy in the world, in India, like in Rajasthan, they were communities which today are called scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So in other words, it's like today's, let's say, computer scientists are considered big shots, and maybe in a future era, they'll be considered low in value in their stature and in their economic value and professional clout, and they would be considered some kind of a low caste. I'm just giving a kind of a comparison and analogy. Metallurgists were very highly paid. Their product was sold all over the world per ounce, per unit of weight. It was very highly priced, the way you would consider precious minerals and metals today. They were certainly not underprivileged. But today, those communities are considered scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. Lot of professions that over the past 1,000 years or even longer, that became kind of not very appreciated, considered low. They just got classified that way. And to give them a Hindu name or a Vedic name using some kind of a varna or caste is a way to blame the Indian system for something which is more of a social problem that happened as a result of history, that happened as a result of foreign invasions, disruption of society, disruptions of the local ecosystem. So if there is a balanced ecosystem where many professions are held in a network of interactions, and then something disrupts and such that certain professions and certain communities lose, then foreign anthropologists can come and say, oh, this is some kind of a Hindu classification, but that is not so. That is certainly not so. So I think that the origin of, while I do not have an exact pinpointed theory of the origins of Dalits, I can say that this business of certain jobs they are doing, which others feel are, required them to be separated and quarantined. That's a professional thing. It doesn't mean that the child of such a person also has to be in the same way. The child of a Dalit can go to college, become a scientist, and do something completely different. So the problem of Dalit happened because it got imposed as a matter of heritage, as inheritance. Uh, your DNA, your parents will define whether you are Dalit or not. That's the problem. Otherwise, if it was for a person based on his merit, based on his profession, based on how clean he is, uh, based on all that, it would be no different than any modern quarantine.
Could it have something to do with the Turkish invaders who maybe brought the commode into India, but they did not use the drainage system or the sewage system, and use the class of you can say poor Indians to do the cleaning of the rulers?
Absolutely. 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 They're bringing the commode. So now you have to take the waste, which is toxic by any standards, modern scientific standards. And if there's no drainage system, and the ruling elite are the Mughals and the Turks and all these people are ruling elite, and creating a class of people who do all the dirty work, and then they have to be kept away from the rest of society to keep them protected, to keep the society protected. A kind of system of quarantine probably contributed to this also. And there may have been similarly many such things, which resulted in the kind of a solidifying a kind of a Dalit thing. And now, of course, the churches and the foreign invaders ideologies, they want to all blame this at the doorstep of Hindu dharma.
Right, exactly. Thank you, Rajivji, for this very lucid explanation. Now we will go into something completely different. Last year, I was watching an interview of Ben Shapiro. You being an American citizen, you may know him, in which he said in the Fox News that it is the white man who had given the world modern civilization. Is such a very arrogant and historically false statement a direct result of the Aryan race or the Aryan invasion or the Aryan migration theory? I mean, how much this race invasion theory is important for the Western civilization to sort of glorify themselves? How important it is for them?
Well, I think that firstly, the whole Aryan invasion theory is false. We know that, and it was brought up in the 1800s for the first time and propagated in a big way, and used as a tool to sort of show. First of all, the idea was the purpose of the Aryan bringing the Aryan invasion theory was to claim that this great language Sanskrit and its texts, all the Shastras, are the creation of the European people because they were the Aryans and they brought it to India. So when they found that Sanskrit is such an amazing language, more amazing, far more superior than Latin, Greek, any of their languages, uh, the study of Sanskrit became very popular in the entire 1800s. From the early 1800s till the later 1800s, every major university in Europe had big center of Sanskrit, and they often downsized Latin and Greek in order to fund Sanskrit studies, because with Sanskrit they could learn linguistics, they could learn philosophy, they could learn medicine, they could learn so much from data mining the Shastras, which is what the whole rise of a lot of European science and European knowledge system was based on. So there was a thirst for that. That was one thing. But you can't be ruling over some people in India halfway around the world, mining all that knowledge and claiming that these people are superior, because then why are you ruling them? If the idea of rule was that we the Europeans are civilizing them, then you got to show them as uncivilized people. So it was important to show that this Sanskrit, the product of these so-called Aryans, had to come from overseas. So that was one reason. Another reason was that Germany wanted to identify as the Aryans in order to create a positive identity for themselves. The French had an identity based on the Renaissance. the British could claim that they are great because they have this empire and they have this English language and all these kind of great things that they were proud of, royal family and all that. The Germans were considered barbarians. The Germans were considered barbarians by European people. Even in their own textbooks, they were shown as their origin is barbarians. So how do you create a positive image? They were really struggling in order to create Germany as a modern nation state. In the 1800s, it was necessary to have a positive narrative. So the discovery that Sanskrit is related or very close to German was a big breakthrough. So they had to then therefore claim it as their own. These are all the sort of reasons that the Aryan invasion theory got started. And once it got started, it was very useful to also then divide North Indian, South Indian, accuse Hindus as sort of Aryan, prosecute the people who are persecuting the others. So a lot of things happen to generate this false Aryan theory. Now, as far as superiority of the Western civilization is concerned, the West has many things that came together to create the West, including Christianity, Judeo-Christianity. So apart from anything to do with the Aryan, they also, the claim is of the greatness has to do with that they are the chosen people in the Old Testament, and Christianity is what especially the Protestant religion led to the modernity. The whole Max Weber thesis that Protestantism was necessary in order to bring about the rise of free enterprise and private capital and all the whole rise of modernity and technology and science and objectivity. So there's a lot of religion argument in the sort of a theory of superiority of the West. There's a lot of argument. Somewhere in there is also race argument, but I think there's also a lot of religion argument. So the arguments why they consider West to be superior, bottom line is that conquerors always want to be considered superior. Nobody wants to say that I've conquered superior people. That's a matter of shame. I've conquered inferior people. I've conquered them. I've conquered the Native Americans because they were inferior, they were ill-treating their women, and they were cannibals, and they were doing bad things, and they had human rights violations, and so I'm justified in conquering them. The oldest theory, rationale, and excuse for conquering other people is to say that they were inferior and we are superior, and we are bringing them superior civilization and culture. We're teaching them logic and science and math and human rights and all of that. It's whether it's the invasion of Iraq was to create to bring human rights there. All the arguments to invade Afghanistan is to bring democracy, because we are superior, we know how to turn them into democracy. So this business of superiority of the aggressor is a very common tendency. Now you'll find that also in the Islamic and Arab countries, what they're teaching is that the reason we expanded to convert all those kafirs is because they were no good, they were uncivilized, they had bad behavior. You have a discussion with a logical, rational Islamic scholar from not India because it's too political, but I know a lot of people from non-Indian, Turkish, Iranian, and Arabic sources that are in prestigious places in United States. They are here in Princeton. They are very polished, very highly sophisticated thinkers. And I've had discussions with them saying, what is your rationale for conquering all these people? Why would you do that? Because they keep saying we are a peaceful religion and all that. After a lot of back and forth, what it boils down to is a sense that we are superior, they were inferior. We are helping liberate their women from abuse. We are helping liberate the Dalits. We are helping liberate the low caste people. We don't have caste in our system. All of this is false stuff, false logic to justify conquest and expansion. So back to the issue of Western claim, arrogant claim of being a superior civilization. I would say it is working the logic backwards from having to show that we are superior because we conquered other people, we are justified in conquering other people. Now we got to show what's good about us and what's bad about them. It comes down to that. It comes down to rationalizing aggression in the name of superiority.
Wonderful, wonderfully said. Rationalizing aggression in the name of superiority. So this brings us to what I consider to be your magnum opus, Breaking India. Things that today idea of breaking India or the phenomenon of breaking India has become almost mainstream. Everybody is talking about it, and you are the one of the reasons that we have been able to draw our attention to this factor. We know that lot of breaking is going on. We have already explained in your books and talks how they divided us into races by the absurd logic of the size, of the shape of the nose. And then, of course, now there's this extreme right wing, the missionaries, the ultra left, the Islamic, the radical Islamists, the Maoists, all sort of joining together to break up the society, to break India into fragments, and how the money is being sourced, the funds are from where they are coming. But especially, I was quite shocked and bewildered when I first heard from you about this afro-dalit platform, freedom platform, or freedom, this concept. Please tell us about it. Tell us about your own experience and how you see it.
So, in Princeton University, there was a professor, Nell Painter, Nell Painter, African American woman, head of African American studies. And in the 90s, a good friend of mine, she was married to a white guy, and she was champion of, this whole African culture and identity and so on. And she was studying white culture. So she wrote a book on the history of white people, and one of her courses was called Whiteness, and very popular in Princeton University at the time when she was here. She's no longer here. So I became friends with her. I would sit in her class. She would tell me a lot of stuff, and so I was learning through her the whole history of race in America, how it goes way back, and so she was. In fact, I would say I had a very constructive intervention when she was writing the history of white people. She showed me a copy. She sent me the draft, which I have a copy of, and it began with the first chapter on Aryan theory as the Aryan invasion, as the Aryans as the origin of white people. And so I stopped. I said, Nell, don't do this. You don't have your facts. He said, no, this fellow told me. Gyan Prakash, who teaches Indian history in Princeton, he told me. I said, but he's a Maoist, he's a Marxist. He has got his own agenda. So all her sources were these, ultra left Indians only. So I argued successfully and told her, listen, either you explain both sides, for which your whole book will be changed, or you just leave it out. And you want to discuss in a separate book, I'll be happy. If you want to have a debate, I'll be happy. So she concluded that it's better to leave it out. So in that book, she left out this whole business of this Aryan hocus pocus. Otherwise, it would have created even more problems. But anyway, that book came out and it was very successful. And so one day, and I was writing a book of my own on the whole race in America. I have a 500-page draft for the last 20 years. I have not published it, on the whole history of whites and how they came, and the relationship with Native Americans, the relationship with Africans, and then how they projected it to Asia with Philippines, and then the attack on Mexico, all the whole racial expansion of the United States. I'm writing a whole book on that. And one day we were having lunch with her team. She introduced all her faculty, senior scholars and students to me, and I was enjoying the collaborating with these people. One day we were sitting in a restaurant and having lunch, and man walks in. He's an African American, and they introduce him, and he says, "Oh, you are from India. I just came from India." I said, "Oh, wonderful. What were you doing there?" So that's the first time I heard the term Afro-Dalit. He said, I was part of this. I went there as part of this Afro-Dalit project. So I said, what is that? So he sat down and he started explaining to me, oh, don't you know, Afro-Dalit project is, project to explain to the Dalits of India that they are like Africans and the non-Dalits are the whites. And so the race, all our experience in USA about race history, we are educating them that the history of India is also like that only. I said, this is all nonsense. What? So he was sweet guy. So he invited me to his office in the university, and I went there. And on the wall was his map, which became the cover of my book, Breaking India. His map hanging there, which had this Dalistan and this and that and all that. I think he had gone to India, and they'd given him all this separatist stuff. And there was one Dalistan.org, kind of a website. I don't know what happened to it. I think the Indian government brought it down or something. Uh, but he was into that, and so I used him as a way to learn, because I don't shut people off. I like to understand them, see how I can pick more knowledge out of it. So I asked him who all are in the Afro-Dalit project, who funds it, where does the money come from, and he told me who are the people funding it. He gave me a lot of leads, lot of in his office he had many reports about this Afro-Dalit project. So I borrowed some material from him, and then I got myself some interns from Princeton University, all these people who I knew. I hired some interns, some volunteers, some students to do research, and I had them go to all these Afro-Dalit people in the United States. What were they doing? Some of them in Africa, some of them in Europe, but mostly in United States. Who are the people in India that they are working with? Where do they get the money from? Where do they send the money? I looked at how the money is being sent. It was all through the churches, and how it is being classified in a mischievous way. In the United States, the money is being raised for human rights and to bring education and to empower youth and to empower women and all that good stuff. Nobody would argue against all that. But when this money reaches India, wherever the money lands in India, I hired some assistants in India to follow up what's going on. There it's being used for conversion. There it's being used for creating this Afro-Dalit as a weapon, as an intellectual weapon to break up. So I got very concerned, very scared. I went and talked to gurus. They didn't want to talk about it. They just didn't want to get into controversy. I talked to the Indian embassy. I said, "Don't you know this is a big threat to India?" They didn't want anything to do with it. Whoever I talked to, nobody wanted to take it seriously. I had these people who were VHP America, BJP America, all these guys, and they said, "No, we never heard of this. We don't want to worry about it. We want to look at everything positive. We have 800 temples, and we are doing very well. Indians are making a lot of money, and we are building these temples. And in these temples, because we got temples, we'll be okay." So I said, temple is one area, one kind of space. Family is another kind of space. School is another kind of space. College is another kind of space. Public policy is another kind of space. Media is another kind of space. You got to worry about all of these. If you want to worry about the identity of our people and the integrity of our society, then you have to worry about the discourse in all of these places. And you cannot just say because we're building temples, therefore we don't have to worry about all this Afro-Dalit stuff going on. So this poisoning of the university system, what was called South Asian studies, the whole study of South Asia, the Indian subcontinent, filled with this sort of stuff. This Afro-Dalit poisoned a whole generation of African Americans against India. And right now, when they have this Black Lives Matter, the point is that had they listened to me, had the Indian authorities and gurus listened to me 25 years ago, we would have. My project was that I know people like Nell Painter. I know people who are in African American studies. They're listening to me. If you guys help me, we can re-educate the whole African American university system in this country and bring them onto our side. We can say that together we have suffered from colonialism. Together, both of you and we've suffered from colonialism. We should be together. But nobody wanted to help in that. Nobody wanted to do such a project. It was too messy, too dirty, kind of, you get your hands dirty, controversial. Nobody wanted to from India. So what has happened is the Indians ignored this whole Afro-Dalit thing going on. This Afro-Dalit thing took a life of its own. The Muslims took over to enter this when this Black Lives Matter started. And soon after 9/11, the Muslims felt attacked. So they kind of built an alliance with African Americans. And so Muslims and blacks started building a camaraderie. The Islamic intervention and infiltration into the Marxist and leftist became very strong. So what has happened now is that the whole Black Lives movement, there's a lot of Islamic support for it, a lot of left-wing support for it. Indians are on the back foot. This need not have happened. And now instead of the Hindu right attacking Black Lives Matter and saying, "Oh, all these African Americans are against us," the point is it's our fault. They were people who were slaves. They became free. They wanted to understand their history. and they wanted to kind of decolonize their own history, like we want to decolonize. And rather than working together with them, we ignored that, and we gave that space to the Afro-Dalit theory walas, the people who are making these stupid theories like Afro-Dalit. They had a field day. There was a vacuum. Our people didn't take it seriously, and those guys came in. And that 20 years later, you are seeing the result of that. It's the our arrogance and ignoring the whole Afro-Dalit movement. Started talking about it in the late 90s. My book came out a decade later, but I was talking about it in the late 90s and wanting help. And I was predicting that if we don't do anything, this will become a big time bomb for us, which it has. So the Afro-Dalit is a shame that we allowed this kind of a movement to happen. We did not take it seriously. And today, what we are finding is that India is on the hot seat, on the back foot when it comes to Black Lives Matter, African Americans in this country, the American left, all of that. And I would say we have a lot to blame for that.
Yes, thank you, Rajiv ji. And how do they go about it? I mean, do African scholars and students come to Bharat, come to India, and mix with these Dalits with the help of NGOs and try to explain that we are on the same boat, we have suffered the same thing? Is that the process that they engage in?
Yeah, so what they did is that is actually the process that happened. They had NGOs, they had church groups facilitating it, they had a lot of money, and they brought in these African scholars. And Nell Painter, a good friend of mine, listened to me on this throughout the whole Aryan theory from her book. I would have, if people had given me some support, I'm just one man, I can do only so much. If I'd gotten some support from gurus or from government or from RSS, from anybody who's supposedly looking after our culture, I would have used her and many others like her and created a counter movement long back in the 90s. I could have done it. So this is exactly what you are saying is exactly how they did it. They built institutions, they built training programs in India where they would go to Dalit areas and with Christianity and with human rights and NGOs and give them some help and do under the garb of youth empowerment, women's empowerment, human rights, social justice. Very nice. Who would argue against it? Who would say, oh, it's a bad idea to do a camp on social justice and youth empowerment? It's a good thing. So they use very nice terms and got in the 90s and also in the early parts of the after 2000. And this has been a very big project in India going on for a long time. Now, today, of course, if Indian government is serious and if Hindu people, Vedic people are serious to counter it, rather than accusing the blacks as being sold out against us and we have to hate them and we have to hate Obama and all that, these things happened much later. The rise of this Obama, Kamala Harris, all the blacks and all that is a very recent thing. The foundation of this is much earlier. And if we were to go back to the roots and address the roots, criticize the roots, falsify the roots, come up with our training, it'll take funding. It will take some initiative. We can have our camps, we can have our workshops and our conferences. We can sponsor books from our point of view. We can give scholarships to people. Of course, this will take money, but the other side spent a lot of money. And I put all my money into it. I just needed some help. And even now, we could turn this around. It would be a better strategy than trying to fight them and push them away to the other side. Because, blacks are a force in America. I give them a lot of credit. Blacks suffered a huge amount. And I say more power to them. What they are doing is trying to get even and trying to get their rights. And we would be foolish to try and stop that, push them back, accuse them. We ought to be actually helping them like Muslims are helping them. Now I'll tell you another interesting thing. About a decade ago, Metropolitan Museum of Art had one of these big museums. I think the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I was on a MSNBC show 10, 15 years ago. Melissa Paris, something like that. I've forgotten her name, an African woman. She was a good talk show host. And 2-3 times she had me on her show. And we were celebrating Black History Month. and I was explaining the link between Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and the how Indians helped the civil rights movement, how uh, Gandhi in particular, but many other Indians were very important in helping the blacks. And this was a huge hit on MSNBC Sunday morning show, one of the most popular shows. And that link is that video is on my YouTube channel. So somebody can just put it up if they find it. Two, three episodes I did. They were so impressed, and they wanted me to come to create a collaboration with African Americans. And again, I went trying to look for help, and nobody from our side was willing to help me. One of the African guys sitting on my side in that TV show was head of a museum in New York, some African American museum. And after the show, he told me that we are doing a special exhibit in our museum in collaboration with Metropolitan Museum and other museums. He says we are doing a special exhibit on the history of Africans in India. The history of Africans in India, real history. So I went and studied that. I still have excerpts from that. What they showed was during the Islamic rule, a lot of slavery existed. Muslims had slavery. The Islamic slavery system, they keep denying it, but actually there's a slavery system from North India. Slaves were being taken to Kazakhstan, all these Stan countries, Central Asian countries. There's a PhD from University of Michigan or something, I've forgotten. It's called Hindus Beyond the Hindu Kush. If you search Hindus Beyond the Hindu Kush, is a PhD dissertation by a white American, who went to Russia, went to Moscow to look at the records of slaves being brought to these Central Asian countries from India into the slave market to be sold. How many slaves were brought every year? What was the price? How was the price of men, women, young people, old people, somebody who had certain skill? What was his value? How the value changed over time, 1 year to the next year? They had to walk thousands of miles. Most of them died along the way. What all happened to them? I studied this in great detail. And so this guy, this fellow, this African guy, he had created this exhibition in which he did not know that these Africans who came to India during the Muslim era were brought as slaves. That is what I told him, and he was very interested in that. He wanted to pursue this, and the idea was if he could fund a chair somewhere for this particular topic, if he could fund some research, some conferences, if he could give some scholarships to some young African American students to pursue this. This would have created a new counter movement in our side. We would have turned this around on our side, that the existence of Africans in certain parts of India, there are African people, is because of slavery. They were brought in by the Muslim people as slaves. And some of them got their freedom, some of them became rulers, some of them became allies of local rulers, and they sort of merged with the Indian society. So when you go to parts of India, and you see people who look just like Africans, they are Africans. And the reason is not that it's afro-dalit. The reason is that it's it's the Islamic slavery. So I pushed him to, he had these exhibits with little mention here and there that this community came as part of such and such a Muslim ruler. But then when you dig a little deeper, they came in as slaves. So and some of them then worked their way up. They were good at fighting. They became military commanders. They were given honor and all that. But the slavery is what brought them. So this Afro-Dalit is actually Islamic slavery, Islamic African slavery being brought into India. So when you are talking about what is the origin of Dalits, and one is Commodes from Turkey, another is African slavery under the Muslims. So the counter history that I'm giving you, which has all the facts on it, on Islamic slave trade in India, both bringing slaves in from Africa and taking Indian slaves who had lost out in wars and battles, making them into slaves and selling them in the Central Asian market, is a very big story. It's a huge story. Our people haven't invested. They basically, I do a lot of digging, a lot of work, and they'll write some little article here and there. There are so many, there are 100 people write little article here and there, claim all the credit. They're not interested in joining forces where we could go deep and produce something that will change, be game changing. to do a game-changing counter-narrative is not just one video show and one or two articles here and there and go around giving talks and become very famous. Our people are only interested in quick results. Our activists are interested in making very little investment and getting a lot of value for personal fame and going and getting some big award and getting credited for having done something original. It's more about marketing themselves. It's not really the deep digging hard work which is needed. And so this whole Afro-Dalit stuff is a very big subject. I would love to go back to this Afro-American museum where they have all of that material with them, combine it with the research that has already been done on the history of slave trade during the Muslim period. Several books have been written on the history of Indian slaves being sold in Central Asia. I then connected it with people who became known as pagans, people who became known as gypsies. There are Roma people. Roma is the correct name they use for themselves, and gypsy is a pejorative. A Polish couple, very good friend of mine, because I had companies in Poland. They were very interested in, they were working with National Geographic, and they wanted to do a story on, the origin of gypsies in Europe. I had a company in Romania, and some of the employees working in my company were from that tradition, and they were being persecuted. And I found that people pejoratively called gypsies, but they call themselves Roma people, were the underclass in Czech Republic, in France. Many places where I had businesses, I used to find such people. They are the underclass. They are sort of like the Dalits of Europe. So I got to know those people. I got to be friends with those people. I attended a wedding in Romania of the daughter of one of the leaders of this community. And when I got to know them, their music and their dance is like Punjabi and Rajasthani. It's very surprising. I was having a corporate meeting with my people in a fancy hotel, in a restaurant in a hotel, and I heard a sound of some Bhangra type stuff coming from the next room. And I said to all these people, "What's this going on?" And they were very embarrassed. They didn't want to discuss it, like something wrong. So I said, "No, this is very interesting. I want to see it." And then because I persisted, I walked and I stuck my neck in. And they were all dressed like Christians. There was wedding going on, Christian costumes and all that. But their music and dance was like Punjabi, Rajasthani type folk music. So I asked these people, what's going on? My corporate people, my employees, people working for me, then kind of whispered. They said, "Oh, these are gypsies. They're Roma people. They're not good people. They are all this kind of stuff about them." So I said, "But I want to know them, because this seemed very interesting." They said, "There is a gypsy wedding. This is a very senior gypsy leader here. His daughter's wedding." So I should like to go to meet them. So that's how I got familiar with the fact that even these Roma people in Europe were actually slaves taken from India into the Central Asian markets. And after many years and many generations, some of them got freed up, some of them ran away. Whatever happened, many of them, they migrated towards Europe and they became the Roma people. The gypsies of Europe are of Indian origin. This is absolutely clear. So when I mentioned this to this Polish couple, the husband was a photographer for National Geographic and the wife was a writer. They were team. They took this on as a subject and they said, "We'll propose it to the National Geographic and we'll do a major story on what is the origin of the gypsies in Europe." I said, "Great, I'll help you." So they made a proposal and they got funding, and then they wanted my help. And so I introduced them. I found out that in Patiala University, I found there is a center for the study of Roma people in Patiala University. They study the links between Punjab and Rajasthan on the one side, and all these Roma people in Europe. They study this. So nobody knows about it. So I introduced them to these people. I funded them, said, "Okay, you go there. I'll give you my foundation, will give you some help also." They produced a huge National Geographic cover story. And when the National Geographic got it, they did not want to publish it because this is not good for them. The National Geographic wrote to them saying, "This is against Western family values." He said, "What? What Western family values? You are the guys who are the champions of human rights all over the world. And now you are saying this." They said that, no, this is a family magazine and you cannot make it look, you cannot say things that will disrupt people's sense of identity. They're talking like that, these National Geographic group. So they finally agreed to do an abridged abridged article which has been printed. You can go to National Geographic and you can find that article with nice pictures and whatnot. And there they removed anything that they would be controversial about, too much problem that the Europeans created. But in the research done, I also did my research. I found out that uh, you know in the about 1,000 years ago started this whole slave trade from India to the Central Asia, maybe even before it was going on. But the documentation is there from that time. And these people, after a few hundred years, they moved on to various parts of Europe. They were hunted like animals. There were laws in Europe which made it okay to kill gypsies. They were hunting expeditions to go hunt these people, prizes given for killing them because they were considered like animals. They were considered like people who are subhuman. And so these gypsies, out of fear, they would be traveling from here to there. They had their own culture. They also got into various weird kind of occupations, some of them not very good occupations. So this problem of becoming an underclass is a problem that also affected Europe. It affected Europe with the gypsies. And the gypsies are the Dalits of Europe, I keep telling them. Every time I would go to a conference I went to SOAS in London and all these places. In the moment they would raise their hand and say, what do you think of gypsies? I would say, are you referring to the European gypsies? And they would say, oh, European gypsies. I would say, yeah, all those Roma gypsies. Here's the history of what happened to them in Belgium. This is the history of what happened to them in Germany. This is the history of what happened to them in Switzerland, in all these countries. Here is the history. I would go give out slideshow after this. I have so much material. And these guys would be dumbfounded. I'd say, you should be fighting for Dalit rights right here in Europe, because these are people who lived here for many, many centuries and they've been persecuted. So, when you talk about how to counter this Afro-Dalit, I've given you so much ammunition, so many different areas that need to be brought together. And I propose this so many times that we should create a counter narrative. We can bring the gypsies on our side. We can talk about the history of Indian export of slaves to Central Asia going on. We can bring in this African American who has this museum with all this archive and all this material about how Muslims brought these slaves to from Africa to India. We can put it together and we can become like we are the victims. We are not the people who are doing bad things. We are the victims of all this kind of stuff going on. So the number of such things I have learned in the last 28, 29 years is huge. I can just go on forever and tell you one kissa after another, one story after another, one disappointment after another, where I've tried to get involved as a one man, doing my best. And we are where we are because I just didn't get enough support.
Just fascinating, Rajiv ji, really fascinating. And as I listen to you, when I read your books, it seems that there are two layers of fascination. One is history in the Western sense, the chronological history, what had happened, and another is the way we had written history. That is the history of writing history, or history of creating history,
Yes.
or interpreting history. So, yes, I'll request all the members of the audience to be patient. You're all listening in and you are fascinated, and many people are asking questions. So we will keep the last 10 minutes of the program to try and respond to your questions. In the meantime, let's go along as we talk about this Break India project and this Afro-Dalit movement. We now also know about the gypsies and all these things together. I'll also ask you very briefly, I know it's a big topic, to sort of take us through these waves of indology narratives that have come to the shores of India, as you have said, Marxism, colonialism, post-colonialism, postmodernism, subaltern studies. So for the benefit of our audience, please take us through this briefly.
So, Purva Paksha is our traditions reversing the gaze and looking at other side, how they're developing history, how they're studying us, and giving a response, which in a serious scholarly way. So if I do Purva Paksha of Indology, which means how the Western world has seen India, there is the era of colonialism, during which they had a certain lens. But after independence, colonialism was out of fashion because obviously India was free. But then there was a huge import of Marxism as a way to study India. And this Marxism, also had a kind of this post-colonial studies. Orientalism. Orientalism is a book by Edward Said, very famous book, in which he profiled the gaze and the lens of the Orientalists, the Europeans, how they're seeing the non-Western world. I think he did a superficial job. I think when you look at my book, Breaking India and Being Different, and Battle for Sanskrit in particular, these kind of books, you will find a far more deeper understanding of what he called Orientalism that I have studied in my books, because this is India specific. His was very generic. So that is one wave of Indology, this whole Orientalism. The Orientalism was a kind of a way to Orientalism. The study of Orientalism led to this post-colonial studies, and so India, a lot of these Romila Thapar type people, they call themselves post-colonial, and they were criticizing the colonizers, and they were defending the Indian natives. In fact, large amount of digging up against the colonialists and for the natives, including Hindu Dharma, was done by these kind of people. They were the left wing, and post-colonialism in those days meant that you support the native view, and the Indian view, and you criticize the colonial view. But then came another genre, another wave of Indology called subaltern studies. And subaltern studies said that it started in Europe, and said that history has been written from above by the elites, and history should be written from below by those who have been suppressed. Their voice has been suppressed. This is fine. I agree with it. But the Indians who learned all this from Europe brought it to India and applied it to India, and started saying, let's look at the history from the Dalit point of view, from the women point of view, from the minorities point of view, because it's been written by the Brahmanical elite in collaboration with the British. So the subaltern studies became a kind of a beginning of a Breaking India tendency, because they could go to anybody who had a gripe against India and say, okay, let's look at history from your point of view. And so this afro-dalit would fit in, into their way of looking at things. This history from below became a source of mischief. It became a source of vote bank politics, because CPM, when they were needed by Indira Gandhi for a coalition government support, to support Indira Gandhi's coalition, she needed support from the CPI CPM. They decided that in exchange they did not want railway ministry. What people are nowadays negotiating is how to get bribes. So you get railway ministry, you get a lot of bribes. You get certain ministry, you get a lot of bribes. They wanted education ministry to educate, put this whole subaltern studies, revising history, put it into the Indian textbooks. That's what they wanted. So they were given that. A lot of the mischief that we are living with today, whether it is JNU or 50 other universities like that, started during the CPM era, when they were coalition partners with Indira Gandhi, and they had control over the education, the NCRT books, and the university system. And so these people brought in this whole subaltern studies. It became a very big thing. Oxford University Press started publishing post-colonial studies and subaltern studies, annual conference, each year's proceedings in a very dignified way, giving it a lot of dignity. There was a Muslim guy in charge of Oxford University Press, whom I met in Delhi. He was very proud of it, that he's promoting all this stuff. I mean, I'm not against him in any personal way, but the fact is that this is a few individuals can make a lot of difference. So the CPM had a role here. The bringing in this subaltern studies ideas from Europe was important. Vote bank politics was important. So the subaltern studies became part of empowering the minority vote banks and the fragments of India. Then the famous book, one of your fellow Bengalis, Nation and Its Fragments. Nation and Its Fragments. Huge book, University of Chicago. Huge book like that came. So a lot of prestigious works from prestigious places was done to rewrite Indian history from below, from the subaltern point of view. Gayatri Spivak Chakravarti in Colombia, big champion of all this. Homi Bhabha also into all this. So this subaltern studies then led to another thing called postmodernism. Postmodernism was another thing started in Europe, and Indians became the biggest people learning it, bringing it into India. Indians are importing social models, social theories, literary theories all the time. Whatever is the latest fashion in the West. If I'm a scholar in India, I want to make a name. I'll go around to the Western world, learn some latest theory they have about India, bring it to India, and start marketing it, and become like a champion. So the Western nexuses, funding sources, they like the Indians, whether it's Ford Foundation or anyone else. They like the Indians who are propagating these kind of indologies, which are breaking India indologies. So we had the colonial studies, we had the post-colonial studies, Orientalism. We had the study of subaltern studies. We had the postmodernism studies. So all these different waves of Indology have been basically from the leftist, Marxist, non-Indian, anti-Indian point of view, which says that the unity of India is a farce. It's a very recent creation. It's a Brahmanical and top elite kind of people have put the idea of a nation together. Hinduism is a major culprit of exploitation of people, and our job as liberators is to liberate from all this so-called history of India, which is actually very exploitative. So they started sponsoring works on, Ramayana is exploitative, and in Mahabharat is the exploitation of some minority, and what is exploitation in the Sanskrit language, in Panini's grammar. Sheldon Pollock is all about his whole theory of Sanskrit, brilliant Sanskrit guy. He knows a lot of Sanskrit, but he's interpreting it as a subaltern thing. From a subaltern point of view, from a Marxist point of view, he's interpreting it as sort of, this is the grammar and the Vedas and all that are full of elitism and exploitation. And the idea is to reinterpret the Shastras, according to him, in a way to show the exploitation. The Shastras are a text of exploitation. So the waves of indology from independence onward has become more and more sophisticated ways of studying India, breaking it up into fragments, accusing Bharat and its ancient civilization as the culprit for all the problems that Indians are having, and champion and trying to claim that all this is done for social justice, human rights, etc. So that is a piece of work I have done. Not produced a separate book out of it, but made many talks on this.
Yes, it's amazing, and I hope the viewers are listening intently to all this talk. This is very important and also urgent for us to understand, to pursue, to follow, and to recognize our roles and responsibilities. In this context, another theme that you talk about quite often is how our knowledge systems and our gyan, or our exposition of our Guru Parampara, the ideas and theories and whatever, how they have been appropriated by the Western scholars, which you call U-turn, and then it has been digested, which is your idea of theory of digestion, and now they're importing it back to India as if they are there, as if it is their patent, it is their copyright, it is their intellectual output, and in this way, slowly we are losing whatever we had, which we call our own. So please, talk a little bit about it.
So, that's a great point that you've raised. The theory of digestion and U-turn theory are related in the sense that U-turn is at the individual level. So a Westerner comes and he's very impressed with his guru. So he learns some yoga, he learns some meditation, or he learns about Ayurveda, or he learns some kind of Indian knowledge. There are people who come and study Sri Aurobindo for 10, 20, 30 years, and then they U-turn. There are people who come and study astronomy, astrology, or mathematics, something like that, linguistics. And so after studying something seriously, they then want to, the ego says, I want to take it back and call it my own, that I've discovered it myself. It's not from India, it's mine. Or I want to say that this was done by Aristotle or it was done by Plato, and I'm discovering something. I'm coming up with a new interpretation of an ancient Western thought that will make me famous and important. So ultimately, they are not loyal to India. They're taking all this, they're doing data mining, and they're loyal to the Western academy. They want to become important in the Western academy. So I call them U-turners. And there are stage one is loyalty to India and studying a system. Stage two is they decontextualize the Vedic knowledge and the Indian origins and the Indian history, and they make it look like it's neutral and it was found everywhere in the world. Stage three is they say, no, 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 this is of Western origin. Stage four is they start abusing the Indian tradition, saying it's inferior, it's full of violence and violations and all that. And stage five is they re-export this idea of theirs to India, and so the Indians lap it up. So there's so much stuff Indians believe it's come from the West, which is actually Indian knowledge recycled, brought back, including a whole lot of. Nowadays, I went to Harvard a couple of years ago, this was before the pandemic, and I've done series and series of interviews with the Harvard Medical School and University of Massachusetts, where they're doing so much research using artificial intelligence. They're doing research on the effects of Ayurvedic medicines, meditation, yoga on various medical conditions, and they're looking at the epigenetics. They're looking at all kinds of interesting, knowledge systems, uh, taking out Indian knowledge systems and figuring out new kind of breakthrough ideas for medical science for the future. And when you look at who these people are, somebody had a guru here, somebody went to that ashram, somebody studied under Maharishi, all of that, but they don't want to acknowledge it. They've U-turned. And so the term digestion is when U-turns create a collective effect. U-turn is individual, digestion is collective. So a whole school of thought emerges. So now they're coming up with different Western names for this knowledge, medical knowledge, which they don't want to say is yoga. They don't want to say this is sadhana, this is vipassana. They don't want to say this is Ayurveda. They want to give it their own names. So digestion of vipassana and calling it mindfulness. Digestion of yoga nidra and calling it lucid dreaming. I was at a conference in Tucson, Arizona, where we used to sponsor every 2 years. They had this conference on consciousness. So I used to sponsor that thing. And here is this talk going on lucid dreaming. One Stephen LaBerge, Stanford University, very famous from mental health, psychiatry, medical area, talking about how he's invented this technique called lucid dreaming, and it can cure all these things. And PTSD of military people can be cured. So many things can be cured. And I thought, I've studied this, I practiced this. So I met this guy during the coffee break. He was very nervous that I'm Indian, there's no other Indians there, and I can blow the whistle. I can stand there and say, what this guy is saying is not original. This is all plagiarized. He was so nervous. He took me to lunch and he was very, very, wanted to make sure I'm happy with him. He was going on telling me, no, I love this Indian guru of mine. I was in Rishikesh. I did this for him. I love India. I eat Indian food. See, I'm eating spice and all that. Trying to do all this drama with me. And when I said, you're telling me that you learned all this from your guru, why don't you tell the audience? Why don't you go there and tell the audience you learned all this stuff is yoga nidra, you know it, you're telling me. Why are you not telling them that? He said, I'm doing you a favor by hiding the Indian source because nobody will believe it. I'm calling it mine and Western medicine because then it has credibility. Wow. In other words, I'm stealing your art, your knowledge, calling it mine because then people will believe it. It'll have more prestige because I own it. So whenever I come across that argument, I say that this is like, I think it was King George something or other who was asked, why are you wearing the Kohinoor on your crown? And he said that the people of India should be proud that their king has chosen their diamond to be worn and glorify India by wearing their diamond. So I said, my God, what arrogance! What arrogance! In other words, we are nothing. We are useless when this knowledge is ours, when the assets and resources belong to us, because nobody will take it seriously. But when you, as the elite people, take it over, steal it from us, call it yours, put it in your living room and put it for display, then all of a sudden it will have prestige. People will believe in it, and we ought to be very proud, and we ought to be touching your feet because you've done us a favor. That is their argument. That we were Harvard argument that we are taking all this knowledge. Nobody believes in it. It is not scientific. Who believes that yoga can do this? And who believes that meditation or Ayurveda? We are turning it into science. When we put a thappa on it and we've done the clinical trials and we've done all this scientific analysis, then and we put it into prestigious peer-reviewed journals, then that knowledge becomes valid. So this business of uh, validating Indian knowledge through a Western system of validation allows them to patent it, call it theirs, because they consider it to be the original discoverers. So the community that has practiced it for 1,000 years is not discovered until they put it in a peer-reviewed journal, until they put it through a rigorous analytical process which only Westerners are good at because it's their system. That is their methodology to come up with what is considered legitimate knowledge. So they take your knowledge, legitimize it, and it becomes their knowledge, their own knowledge. So this is the digestion. And I'm writing, I'm writing multiple volumes. I know my people are upset I have not published, but I started with one volume called U-Turn and one volume called Digestion Theory. Now it's like 10 volumes because there's so much material, so many examples. I mean, I need help. I have only limited, time, resources, health, and all that. And the amount of work, the amount of evidence I have, the amount of case studies is across so many disciplines. It's in linguistics, it's in health sciences, it's in botany, it's in biology, it's in mathematics, it's in all kinds of fields that the knowledge systems of India have been digested. And so these projects that I've been telling you about, I have been promoting this with culture ministry for I don't know how many years. They don't care. They listen to me, they listen to my PowerPoint slides, they pass it around, they buy me nice lunch, say, oh yeah, Rajiv ji doing good work, and then nothing happens. I've talked to the Indian Council of Cultural Relations, ICCR, uh, the current head, Sahasra Buddheji, wonderful person, previous head, Lokesh Chandra, wonderful person, but nobody does anything. So it is a job of HRD, it is a job of Culture Ministry, it is a job of ICCR, it is a job of Ministry of Science and Technology. All these problems we're talking about, it is their job to put serious government resources. And they have to bring in subject matter experts who lived and breathed and done so much work in their own capacity for 25, 30 years. They have to bring such people in as advisors to guide them. But somehow the Indian system is not able to take advantage of the research I've done.
Thank you, Rajiv ji. Now we sort of shift the paradigm a bit. Uh, there is one viewer, Anumitra Chakravarti. She has asked, why do you consider that the entire Bengali Renaissance as a British handiwork? And why do you think that Raja Ram Mohan Roy is a Queen's stooge?
See,
This she is asked.
see, I have respect for the Bengali Renaissance. Raja Ram Mohan Roy was no exception. He was a great leader. He did many good things. He also did some bad things. I think his collaboration to bring English into India was the first person who wrote to the British Parliament that they should bring in English and English science and mathematics and knowledge systems to make Indians more logical, scientific, and all that. And only then did Macaulay respond. Macaulay's minute, which is considered the starting point of this whole colonization of India, comes after Ram Mohan Roy's initiative. So, you have to be truthful also. You have to say that, okay, maybe he had good intentions. I'm sure he had good intentions. But at the same time, some of the things he did have a long effect 200 years later. So he was on both sides. He had good friends with East India Company people also. He was close to the British people also, very close to the British people. And he was also playing this idea that he's an Indian, he's a Hindu. So I think he was a complex character. And when you look at the person's life at that time, he did such people did some very good things, but the effect, the long-term effect, it may not have been what we would have liked. So that is my characterization. I have not yet published a multi-volume book multi-volume book I have on the Indian influences on modern Christianity. And when I publish that book, you will see that there are many. I'm talking about the modern period. I'm talking about Portuguese come, and this is the whole Jesuits in the Jesuit Portuguese come from that era onwards. the study of Hinduism, the study of India, all the way to recent times when they are Christianizing yoga and all that. The whole what they've gotten out of Hindu dharma and how it has influenced Christianity. I'm looking at all that, and then it occurred to me that this is not just the work of uh, uh, Western Christians. There are a lot of Indians who helped along the way, and these Indians did not know that they are helping somebody who will use it in another way. These Indians were basically trying to do something good for India. But there's a lot of Bengalis throughout the 1800s, later on also towards the end of that, of the 1800s, were experimenting with, the neo-Hinduism. They were partly uh, really into the tradition. Partly they were into trying to impress the British. The idea was that if we can convince the British and we can look good in their eyes, then we will be scoring victory for us. But that is how you get colonized. You get colonized when you are concerned about what the colonizer will think of you. As long as you are saying, as long as you are, if you are native, you are saying, look, you may think this or that, but my people think differently, and I'm on their side. The moment you want to translate for the benefit of the colonizer so that he can understand you in a positive way, then you're beginning to slip into colonization. So I think he was one of the persons who had that effect, not necessarily intentionally, but he had that effect. And if you look at what all happened, a lot of things that like agamas, deity worship, all of that cleaned out. That this is all no, 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 this is all idol worship and all that. But who says this is a large part of our bhakti tradition? I mean, according to, I would love to see a hypothetical debate between Sri Prabhupada and Ram Mohan Roy, both Bengalis, where Sri Prabhupada would be all into this deities and image and worship and bhakti and all that. And Ram Mohan Roy didn't have much want to do with it because he was product of a different era. So the compromises that our people made because the dominant culture at that time required them to make those compromises, they are part of our colonial baggage. And so the Bengal Renaissance on the one hand is championing the revival of India back to its heritage, but on the other hand is trying to negotiate with the British to make sure that they're also happy with it. They are also happy with it. Whereas somebody like uh, Prabhupada didn't care about what he just, as Bengali and Hindu and Indian as possible, going to Central Park and doing his Hare Krishna, not bothered what people think at the age of 70. So imagine that, what all he had to face. And also Netaji, not bothered what will those guys think, not bothered. There are many Bengalis. I think there are extremes of Bengalis. The ones that I study a lot and get inspiration from include people like Vivekanand, Sri Aurobindo, people like Netaji, people like Prabhupada, many people like that, great Bengalis. And then I also found that there's the other kind who were a bit embarrassed. They were wearing the dhoti below and the shirt and tie above the waist. So when you are sitting at the desk, what people see is the Babu, the Bhadralok. But you can also feel that, hey, but deep inside it, I'm my Bengali. I got my dhoti, and I'll go home. I'll remove all the top stuff, take a bath, and become my Bengali again. So this face of what I am in front of them, what I am in front of myself is very is a it can be okay for a short term, but then you can send mixed signals to other people, other young people who are not as who are not as secure as you are. You may be secure to keep a dichotomy between who I am inside and what I'm projecting outside. It may be okay for you, but after you are gone, your works are interpreted in all kind of different ways, and people make different things out of it, and it could also work against your case, against your cause, because you may come across like you're mixed up. Even Vivekanand's talks, many things he does in his speeches in USA and Europe, different from what he's teaching in India. There is a lot of that. And so he's talking to one audience, and then in India he's talking to a different audience, very nationalistic. But in the West, he's also trying to bring Christians along, impress them a little bit. So, they are a product of their time, but we have to reevaluate them. We cannot just have blind faith and blind worship in everything they did just because they're Bengali and they're Indian and they're Hindu. We have to say that for today, what Raja Ram Mohan Roy did 200 years ago, this part is good, that part is not good for today. We have to be able to pick and choose the things we like and need, and not what we don't need. I'm a product of my age and location and my era, my epoch. I would certainly hope that a generation from now, if somebody were to read my books, they should be able to dissect and say, okay, this part is valid now. That other part was fine for him. He had to do it in his whoever he was facing. He had to say all those things, but we don't have to say it today anymore. I would have no problem if somebody did that with my work. So I think that doing that with Raja Ram Mohan Roy is basically putting him as a person of great importance in his era. A large part of it still valid for us today to inspire us into the future, and many parts of it not so good for us into the future. So that's my kind of a balanced view of him.
And you also say, which many Bengalis think is quite controversial and not verifiable, many Bengalis feel, is that the fact that there was not much sati that was happening in Bengal when Raja Ram Mohan Roy took steps to abolish it in India. That there was hardly not a single record of a sati in Bengal or this part of India at that time. So
Yes.
would you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think that evidence, you see, the burden of proof is on somebody who's making the claim. If they're making the claim that there's this widespread sati, they should prove evidence for it. Sati was mainly in Rajasthan and Punjab. And there are so many books written by left wing Romila Thapar children, Romila Thapar students in the United States in prestigious universities who have written about the origin of dowry, history of sati. A lot of these people and a lot of more right wing type Indians have picked it up also, and the evidence shows that the sati was not like it's happening all over the place and every widow is being burnt. I mean, it was a very rare thing, and to make a very big deal out of it to impress the rulers is sort of like selling out. Because he could have also said that, listen, of course we should ban it because it's no longer relevant, but let's not put it up as a Hindu practice. Let's put it up as a kind of an extreme practice under extreme circumstances. Some of those satis were done because those people were going to get raped. They were captured and conquered by invaders, and they were going to get raped. And rather than that, they would rather kill themselves. So it is like there is assisted suicide. Assisted suicide is a highly debated topic today in the Western world, where the issue is if a person wants to commit suicide because his life is too miserable for whatever reason, could be medical, could be whatever, he wants to choose his end of his life is a better option than continuing because there's no hope for it, and he wants assistance to do it in a pain-free way. And there are laws that say it's considered murder if you help him like that. So even in the United States, there is debate that this kind of thing should be allowed or should not be allowed. So sati could also be considered as a sort of a last resort option because the other options were far worse. I'm not convinced that sati is a widespread thing, and because in some ancient shastra something happened, therefore lakhs of women were doing it, and the British came and they were heroes and they ended it. I don't buy that story.
Absolutely correct. And another last point about this Bengal Renaissance, I think at the other extreme, from the positive side, it has also got to do what you say is like Purva Paksha. I mean, know your enemy, know your opponent. So the people like Vivekananda or Aurobindo or Netaji or even Chittaranjan Das, they of course were groomed in a Western education, which helped them in a way to understand them, you see, and to counter them the way you are doing, because you are quite familiar with the Western system.
Yes. So I'm similar. I have lived here for 50 years. When Americans tell me, "Who are you to say all these things about us? You're a foreigner." I say, "Listen, I lived here for 50 years, and only 30% of the American population are more than 50 years old. So 70% of the American population have lived here less than I have lived here." So I ask people in a big audience in any place, "How many of you raise hands are more than 50 years old?" Very few people raise hand. And I said, I have lived in the United States longer than you have lived here. So what do you mean by saying, who am I? I know more about America. I've studied more about America. I paid more income taxes because they believe that that matters a lot to the your standing as a citizen. I've paid so many tens of millions of dollars of income taxes to the United States government because I had a lot of good businesses. So I'm an American citizen in good standing. I know a lot about this country. I have all the adhikar to criticize it as much as you, maybe more, because I've contributed so much to this society. I've lived here very long. I've lived here in the East Coast, West Coast, California, Michigan, all these places I've lived here. How you guys haven't? You guys mostly lived in one or two states. I lived in so many states. I've had thousands of employees, all kind of American employees, white employees working for me. I've created jobs. So what the hell do you mean by saying that who am I to criticize America? I have every right to criticize America. So I'm a product of, I'm a Bharatiya. I have all that with me. And I'm also very knowledgeable, fluent, educated on American history, American philosophy, you know, from the very beginning till now, I understand. I'm a scientist by training. So I am utilizing my resources to reverse the gaze on behalf of the Bharatiya lens, looking at it from the Bharatiya lens, and having all this knowledge about the American society. I'm able to do something quite unique, and I'm not able to do a lot of things that somebody else can do, which they should do. On the other hand, they cannot do a lot of things I can do, which I should do. So the same way you could say about Ram Mohan Roy, you could say about Vivekanand, they're also product of their time, their culture, their background, and so they did the best they could, and it is okay for us to evaluate them for today. Smriti, Smriti is a rewriting, a reappraiser, and updating for today knowledge that was in the past. It is knowledge of what happened in the context of today's lens. So we have to smritify the Bengal Renaissance. We have to write the smriti of the itihas of the Bengal Renaissance, which means that we have to put it in the context of today. And this is true for every part of India, not just Bengal.
Yes. And in this context, you insist a lot on this idea of intellectual shatriyata, or let's say like a Brahmanical shatriyata. That, I mean, intellectual people or pundits and scholars should not be merely satisfied with their knowledge and their learning. They should also be aggressive enough to defend their ideology or their darshan or their dharma, and also to be able to understand and know the other. In this context now, after all these waves of indology, we now have a counter wave of Swadeshi indology. What do you think is the impact? What is the impact of this Swadeshi indology?
So Swadeshi Indology is to create a next generation. People keep saying, okay, you are 70 years old. What's going to happen after you're gone? And I'm very concerned. I want to create new people. So the way to create young people, we have about a dozen full-time paid employees in Infinity Foundation in India, and we are grooming them. We have another large number of interns and volunteers. And the Swadeshi Indology is a method to find new people. So we have a topic, we do a conference, a Swadeshi Indology conference. We have Swadeshi Indology websites and Swadeshi Indology proceedings we produce, and videos and all that. So there's a peer review. People who want to participate within the given topic, they submit their papers, abstracts and papers. We don't pick on based on who's famous. Lot of ministers have been rejected. Lot of big netas have been rejected. Lot of people who thought that they ought to come in just because they have a famous, they are very highly reputed. They were rejected because their papers were no good. On the other hand, unknown people who got a good paper have been accepted. So Swadeshi Indology is entirely merit-based way to filter and bring in people, and these people then become the intellectual leaders, the kshatriyas. They're intellectuals, and they're also got debating skill. So that is the kshatriyata. They are. You see the word Arya, not Aryan with the N becomes like a race. There's no Aryan in the Vedas. That is the Europeans turning it into a race. But the word Arya as a kind of nobility are sort of Brahmin Kshatriya combination. These Aryas are brave people. They are brave people, they're leaders, and they're highly intellectual. So I would say the idea of intellectual Kshatriya matches somewhat the idea of Arya without the N at the end. Not a race of Aryans, but the quality of people that is talked about in the Vedic literature. I would say that is what the revival of intellectual Kshatriyata is about. Because a Brahmin who's only Brahmin does not want to get into debate. That could never have produced Vivekanand or a Sri Aurobindo. It would never have produced those kind of people. And on the other hand, if they're intellectuals, uh, there are a lot of these Marxist, leftist, dry kind of intellectuals. They really haven't studied a whole lot of the Shastra. They haven't done tapasya. They haven't done sadhana. They really don't have the experience, and they're commenting on it on theories and all that. That is no good either. So you got to have the adhyatmic side. You got to have studied with a guru. You got to have studied the Shastra. You got to have done a lot of that in your own self, with your own body. You got to have understood these practices and their experiences within yourself, and then you have to take it out to the public and debate, argue, defend yourself, learn from others. So the inner process and the outer process, the Brahmin side and the Kshatriya side, have to work in tandem to create proper leaders for today.
That's fantastic, wonderful. And another point that we feel is very important is education. The education policy, the mainstream education, it is still the old model, the Western model, which Vivekananda used to say is the Nastic education. Nastic, not in the sense as no God, in the sense that there is no search for higher dimensions of life. So, what do you think about this new education policy of the present government last year? Do you think it is good, or do you think it is too little? I mean, too late?
Well, it is certainly too late. That is true. This kind of thing could have been done long ago. It is also too little because it's a lot of fluff. It's a lot of high level buzzwords. They've done a lot of copy paste from here and there. I got a call once. I was returning home from some event, an art exhibition in somebody's house, dinner. I was returning home, and this gentleman was driving me back home, and the phone rings, and there is Baba Ramdev. And this happened like when this education policy they were formulating. And Baba Ramdev was saying, I want to introduce you to this so and so, who is one of the leaders in this new education policy committee. And he wants to learn from you. And he handed the phone to this other gentleman. And this gentleman was very full of, oh, we want to include you. We want you to be part of this, all of that. And I was in the car. And I said, listen, I'm not taking notes and all that. So why don't you email me? Here is my email. You email me, show me a draft, show me what the issues are. I'll be happy to participate, and so on. He never did. He never followed up. Two or three other people called and wrote and said, why don't you submit your inputs? I have submitted so much input in person with hundreds of PowerPoint slides, thousands of pages of reports and proposals, not even anything to do with NEP, but in general. And I've submitted to so many different ministries and all that, not only during the Congress era when this Kapil Sibal was a education minister and so on, but also especially during the Modi era, especially during that, and not being able to really get answers. So my view is that this NEP is kind of good showmanship. It's very good optics. It looks nice at a high level, but translating this into actual curriculum, teaching lacks of teachers. There are lacks of teachers, not just thousands, that need to be retrained. That's a very big undertaking, and this will take a long time. So when you have turned it into coursework, into textbooks, when you've turned it into teacher training, then you begin to teach a new generation, then takes 15 years for that generation to mature. We'll be finished by then. It is just too slow, too little, too late. And the focus on is not enough in this. The focus is not enough on what is relevant for India's survival in this era. This is where my book on AI comes in. We are facing some threats which are very imminent, very serious now, between now and 2030. And we don't have the luxury of sitting back and debating for a long time to write a book on history or something like that. Those things should have been done a long time ago. So I feel that this is better than nothing. It's good optics. I am skeptical about ground level impact on the Indian identity and the Indian knowledge and the Indian self confidence. I'm very skeptical about that.
And just because you mentioned AI and your recent book, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Power, is a very, very important book, which I recommend everybody should read and also follow the talks on this subject by Rajiv ji. Now, I would like you to briefly discuss this Breaking India process in context of artificial intelligence. Is artificial intelligence sort of accelerating this process of breaking us up, not only in the Indian society, I think all societies, and what you call is leading up to a modernization of the masses. So, would you
Yeah,
briefly talk about it?
yeah. Every technology is an opportunity for, it's like a reset, and new leaders will emerge using that technology, and other people will become slaves or colonized because they don't know how to use the technology. So one should remember that 200 years ago, the British Industrial Revolution was very instrumental in the colonial project. If they had not had the Industrial Revolution, they would not been able to rule over India. The electrification of factories, more productivity, better standardization, better output gave Britain the wealth, industrial wealth, which and India was a captive market. They could get raw material from India, put it through the industrial machinery, send it back as finished goods. That Then France got into the act. Then Britain and France started competing over colonies. Who has more colonies? The reason they could beat out Spain and Portugal because they didn't have industrial revolution. So the industrial revolution became the basis for a whole new world order, a world order, not only globally between colonizer and colonized, but within the country. Who's the ruler? Who's the big leader? Who's in charge? And who are the servants? All this got reshaped by the industrial revolution. So now AI is called the fourth industrial revolution, and as an industrial revolution, more powerful, stronger than any prior one, AI is going to create new haves and have-nots. There'll be new concentrations of wealth. There already are. They'll be USA and China will become like Britain and France. They'll become the AI powers, and India and large parts of Africa and Latin America and all that may end up becoming like colonies again. So I'm really concerned about India's lagging in AI. Uh, China started understanding all these things 15 years ago. They started competing with the US in AI on equal terms. India has followed a different plan, which I disagree with. The Niti Aayog plan, NASSCOM, FICCI, all these McKinsey reports and Price Waterhouse reports and all the industrialist reports on AI are advocating that we train human resource and sell labor to American companies. But selling labor while you can do wage arbitrage and mark up the wages and make money, you don't make your own intellectual property, you don't own the technology, you don't own the research, that belongs to the client. So the analogy I give is that some laborers from a poor village in Bihar come to Delhi, and they are making a building. They're bricklayers, they're construction workers, and back home they're sending money. It looks good, and the guy could send selfies and pictures and make it look like he's a Delhi wala and or somewhere in Calcutta and he's got a good life. But actually, he's just a laborer. And when he's finished doing the project, he goes to the next project. He does not own equity even in one brick. He may have installed lakhs of bricks in his life for many, many clients and built many wonderful buildings. He can be proud of it. His skill is great, but he's not the Malik, the owner of anything. So similarly, India has got one of the largest, AI workforces, and constantly developing more. But they're working either in Silicon Valley or in Europe. They're working in Microsoft India, Apple India, Google India, all of that. The fruits of their work, in terms of patents and intellectual property and all that, does not belong to India. So they always counter my criticism that India is behind by saying, "Oh, we got so many lakh AI people, and look at Sundar Pichai and look at Satya Nadella." I say, "Yeah, but those are highly paid employees." I mean, if the East India Company hired an Indian to be an employee and paid him a lot of money, the point is still he's not the owner of the East India Company. The owners are the ones who own things. You're still an employee, maybe you're worth millions. I'm happy for them, they're worth millions. They're doing very well, we're very proud of them. But that is not an Indian knowledge system. It is not Indian know how. It is not Indian patents. We still depend on importing AI and all kinds of other technologies, related technologies, because India did not invest in its own. So India is really at risk that the AI is going to be is being used in by other people, and we have to license this from them. We have to use it on their platforms. We don't even control our own social media, and the social media is run by algorithms, and these algorithms are AI algorithms. So social media is behind it is the AI engine that is driving it, so we don't even control that. In defense, we have to buy Rafale jets because they have AI in them. They have vision, they have all kind of AI in them, which we don't have. So constantly we are re-importing. We're going on importing new technologies at a huge cost, while we keep saying that we have so many lakhs of engineers. But what's the good if these engineers are working for other people? We have not turned our intellectual resource of labor, of high tech labor, into very big projects of our own. We did that in atomic energy. We created an atomic energy commission. Rather than lakhs of Indian atomic scientists going abroad, we created a place for them to work in India. We did it for ISRO. Rather than lakhs of space scientists going and working all over, there are a lot of them working in NASA, I know. But we also created huge projects for them here. We do not have AI projects of that scale. There is no AI commission. I wish there would be some kind of an AI enterprise of the scale of Baba Atomic Research and ISRO. I wish there were an AI kind of an enterprise where tens of thousands of people with lakhs of crores of budget would be building very powerful next generation AI engines. And we are not doing that.
And in this context, one of the greatest strengths that we have as a country, uh, that is our parampara, is our tagis, the sadhus, the gurus. I mean, they have been the bearers of real knowledge or real wisdom. So, what is your experience of Indian gurus and sadhus and organizations, or even the RSS or the political parties in this work that you're trying to do? Have they cooperated with you? Have they been with you? Have they shown some side of a support to you, or have they stayed away?
So, this is very interesting question, because the people I call mega gurus who got big multinational, Hindu organizations, I don't want to name them, but everybody knows them. The top 10, 15, they're really big gurus, and they are huge multinationals. They are billions of dollars worth of assets all over the place. They got lakhs and millions of followers. They're very big enterprises. They have not been at the cutting edge of understanding this issue of technology. They have not been able to listen to me. They're not even receptive. They're kind of skeptical. They would rather that I not talk about it because they don't understand it. They don't understand it. So when I talk about these things, I'm embarrassing them. And so in a sense, I'm a whistleblower saying that all is not well. Our intellectual leaders, our spiritual leaders are not at the cutting edge. There is a large spiritual component of AI's impact. I call it battle for self in my book. In this book, this is my book. The battleground 4. I have got 5 battlegrounds in the back of the book. Battleground 4 is battle for self. That's a spiritual issue. That's a spiritual issue of what is happening to the adhyatma, what is happening to the sense of self. If I'm going to wear augmented realities and get all my pleasures from outside, if somebody is going to push a button and some hormone will create a certain euphoria, or I'll imagine I'm a cricketer, I'm imagine I'm doing skydiving or going to some tourism spot, and if all this fantasy and all this desire indriyas being fed by desires is going to be enhanced and perfected with the use of AI, that is antithetical to the adhyatma, to the sense of our own self discovery. So there are a lot of AI issues, from jobs to what is happening to Rashtra, Indian Rashtra, and the use of AI for breaking India forces we talked about. There are so many areas that ought to concern RSS, that ought to concern BJP, that ought to concern all the gurus, but I'm not finding that that's the case. So, in fact, I will say that you are the second spiritual leader who's shown so much interest on this AI. The first one is Swami Sarvapriyanand of Ramakrishna Mission in New York, also a Bengali, by the way. He knows me well. He's a young person and he's very well educated, very scientific, knows me for several years. When I did this book, he wanted to understand AI. He's very open, very honest, but he said, I don't know AI. I don't know AI, but you can teach. I will want to learn. So I sent him the book. We had many, many discussions over the phone, and he's read it, he's understood it, he understands the issues, and he goes around wherever there is a conference and he's invited as a speaker, and I'm not invited. He puts my book up and says, "Read this book." So he is somebody that I mean, he's certainly a very promising collaborator for me. I think you could be like that. I could take some of your the people who are in your ashram, who are well educated, scientific minds, and maybe we could create a project together. I'm not finding the same receptivity from the mega gurus. Either they are afraid because they are ignorant and not humble enough to want to learn, or they're too rich and too famous and they don't want to bother with it. They don't need it. It's not going to affect them. Whatever it is, I'm not finding that they are playing the role that they should play. Now, I will tell you, Christianity has leaders in AI. There is something called Christianity and AI, faith and AI. There are people in different traditions who are interested in the role of AI in faith and how they should take advantage of it, how they should, what are the threats it brings, how to counsel their students about AI, how to be responsible. I'm not finding that among the Hindu community. Whether it is spiritual leaders at the top level, whether it is RSS, the Indian media don't know a whole lot about it. Indian industry sees it as an opportunity to make money, make some big investments, get some license from Google or something, and start something and make some money. Niti Aayog is kind of lost in this area. They don't know too much about it. So my overall sense of Indian leadership of various kinds is not very optimistic.
And as proceeding on with this, I will ask you another question, which could be a little, controversial, but I think it is very important for me to understand this. Conspiracy theories have been there from the very beginning, and now, to my mind, some of it seems to be quite real. Is the world moving towards a zombie communism? Have the pandemic, the restrictions, and the vaccine protocols accelerated the original intention of what is known as the deep state? One world, one order, one religion, one race, one language scenario. Is AI also helping in that process?
So AI is certainly doing what I call moronization, moronizing, turning people masses into morons, dependent on what Google will tell you. That's where you go for a holiday. Netflix will tell you what movie to watch, who you should marry or date or matrimonial, what the algorithm suggests is good for you. So basically, people are on autopilot, letting all algorithms run their life. And these algorithms are AI. AI is algorithms, algorithms is AI, and these wherever there are algorithms making decisions, certainly the human beings are reducing their agency. I call this battleground number 3, battle for agency, that we are giving up our free will, our faculty to think for ourselves, because we are going into default mode, letting more and more things happen by default, and the algorithm kind of runs it for us and makes choices for us, and we're happy with it. So that moronization or zombieization is happening with AI anyway. And the pandemic may have accelerated it in the sense that there is a loss of self-food, there's loss of jobs, there's a lot of panic, and people are willing to go give up their privacy and their data because they think they'll become safe that way. Uh, the more electronic activity going on, zooming and all those kind of things, the more opportunity to capture data into the AI systems, the more facial recognition, more messaging. So the AI systems thrive on big data. And this the data that is electronic is of course perfect for AI to learn on. So I would say that recent events have accelerated AI's stranglehold, and in fact the share prices of all these big tech companies have skyrocketed because they have become more powerful. So this is a matter of real concern. Now I think that India could, whenever there is this upheaval and a disruption of the old order, it takes a while for a new order to emerge. In between, there is chaos, old order dismantling, new order being negotiated, fighting among options, different contenders. US versus China is a big contender debate fight going on. So, in that period, which is these few years, India has a chance to become a player or a chance to get colonized again. So India should think about, okay, there is a disruption of the old structures. There will be new structures. There will be new winners, and we have to give up some many old ways, and we have to jump into this Kurukshetra. This AI is a new Kurukshetra, but India is not a player. This is where there is no team India in this kind of a game. And I've been researching this for a few years, connecting it with my old AI background and making it up to date. And for a year or two, I've been talking about it publicly. I have not been able to build a whole lot of traction among people who have authority to actually get them to do something. So we cannot really criticize US, China, and others because they are doing whatever is in their best interest. They will do whatever is in their best interest. I'm concerned that the Googles and others like them are becoming like the next East India Company. These people are going to have a huge amount of power over your life, my life, and the zamindari is being done by people like Geo. Geo is the new zamindar. I mean, we are champion. We are very proud. Wow, our zamindar, our Geo. That's like the Raja was put on an elephant and given 21 gun salute, and all the locals would feel very happy. Our Raja are doing so well. The British were very clever. British were very clever. Put this, make the Raja useless in terms of he's got really very little authority. We're running the show, but make him like a spokesperson who's very proud. He's having parties in his palace and a lot of things happening, and he's doing all the stuff for the tradition and the culture. He's celebrating Diwali and we're funding him and all that. Let him do all those things that are emotional. Let the people feel very emotionally happy, but he's hollow. His power is hollow. We've got his sepoys working for our sepoys are protecting his palace also. His courts we are running. He's got no more army of his own. So he's hollow. He's just a figurehead. So the British turned the Rajas into a bunch of kind of like mascots performing for them. It's like that. And today, a large part of Indian industry and some Indian ministers, a lot of politicians, they've become like that because the Googles of the world, and I'm not picking only on Google, all lot of them are like that. They are running the show. They are calling the shots. Who will get blocked? What will get blocked? What is allowed? What is not allowed? So this is happening, and I think it's a shame that the brilliant Indian mind has not caught on to this. The people who are very concerned about decolonizing are falling into this trap of recolonizing, the recolonization of India. Instead of fighting all this trend, creating our own digital platforms, we're falling prey to the American platforms.
And in this context, there is a viewer, Ranka Kishore, who has asked, so what do you think of India's startup ecosystem? Will that help avoid digital colonization?
Well, startup ecosystem does small time things, small scale. It is not on the scale that you can take on the mighty top 10 American companies and the top 10 Chinese companies and another 5 or 10 from other countries. If you take what are the top 30 companies in this kind of a AI related technology, big data and all that, India is nowhere in the scene. And the Indian startup will take a while to reach a $1 billion market cap. And that's considered very big in India. But these companies, many of them are $1 trillion market cap. Some are $2 trillion market cap. And so the other thing is that these startups in India, majority of the funding is coming from American venture capitalists. It used to be Chinese, but now they stopped it to some extent at least. American venture capitalists putting in a whole lot of money. So when the Indian entrepreneur wants to exit and become worth 100 million or 500 million or whatever, his first choice is that Sequoia Capital or some one of these American companies will buy him out. So the Indian startup is a opportunity for American venture capitalists to tap into the fertile Indian brain, let them work hard, a few individuals become rich, buy it off, and it becomes an asset for the American. Either Google will buy it off, or Microsoft will buy it off, or Facebook or somebody will buy it off, or a Chinese guy will buy it off if we allow them, or there's some venture capitalist American company will buy it off. So it is not necessarily a long-term asset for India. Second reason is that the technology the technologies that are real deep technologies are not for startups to do. They are not just a 50 million, 100, 200 million level. These are multi-billion dollar gambles, and they are gambles. They're high risk, but you have to do them. China has done them. So the like for instance, there is something called GPT-3. GPT-3. That's a very deep and fundamental AI technology. Now, Google Brain is a Google's product. China has come up with this version of this. So there is a half a dozen or so big contenders competing against this GPT-3. India doesn't have anything in this. So that requires a lot of natural language processing. That requires a lot of machine learning, new sophisticated technologies. So India is not, I would say, at the platform level, at the deep research level, fundamental research level. India is not into materials research, into lithium stuff, in quantum computing. India is trying to get there. So none of these you can say India is doing nothing. I am aware India is trying a lot, but starting very recently on a very small scale and with modest budgets. That is not enough to catch up. The rate at which China is leapfrogging and the US China race is heating up is so dramatic that it's very difficult to imagine how India will catch up with that.
Yes, precisely. But while you are talking on this, there are many viewers uh, who have who want to know from you, like Max Beach, there is Tumpa De, there is Shantanu Dashgupta, who are all saying, "Sir, what can we do? How can we contribute? How can we join in this movement that you have initiated? What
So
is the
first
role
thing,
that?"
so first thing you
Yes.
can do, as far as I'm concerned, those who are interested in starting an awareness campaign, I have done 50 videos on this topic of AI in the last 6 months. I've had very serious surgery. About 2 months ago, I've had surgery, which is 30-inch long incision on my back from my neck to the tailbone, 5 inches deep, and they planted 26 pieces of hardware, 26 pieces of metal in my back to cure some problems, to solve some problems. I'm not getting into details. Exceedingly long, exceedingly painful. I'm still in recovery, but I'm working. I'm trying to do my best. They told me don't sit up for more than an hour at a time. I'm sitting up here because this is very important to me. And this is the second event I'm doing. I've done one event with Sudarshan TV already in the morning, and tomorrow I'm going to get up and do another 3 hour show for the August 15. So I am putting everything I got for 30 years. Now, what else can I do? You see, but I need help. I need smart people. A lot of people who come and say, I want to help you, they're either not qualified, they're not mature. It's like I'll end up helping them rather than them helping me. At this stage, I need mature people. I need people who are hardworking. I need people who can roll up their sleeves and be given a project and they can be very responsible. So I need folks who want to do serious work. And what we have to do is take the research material I've done and more material that I'm producing, turn it into stories that can be animated, turned into games, turned into entertainment, turned into different languages. Maybe you can create a group that will translate some of my things into Bengali. Maybe take this book, which is 500-600 pages, and have a each of the five battlegrounds could be a small book of 50 pages in Bengali, or maybe one book of 200 pages in Bengali. And maybe a lot of these videos we can edit them and dub them. So I think there are things we can do, which people, if they are really serious, they can do. But they have to be prepared to be serious about it, become leaders. I should not have to lead everything. I'm not able to lead everything. I have only limited health and limited time left and limited, everything, resources. So I need the help. If people are willing, I'll certainly be very excited about it.
That's great and very encouraging to hear from you. And I think we are already sort of putting a lot of pressure on your health. You have crossed 2 hours, but there is one last question, which is the name of the topic for today's session, which is also the question of Shankar Kumar Chatterjee, who says, so where are we heading? Are we heading towards disintegration, or is there redemption? Is there some light ahead of us? Is there something that we can do to change things drastically?
So I think the way I've answered this question many times is the current policies of the government and industry and the lack of policies by spiritual leaders and other thought leaders is these are not satisfactory for India to secure its sovereignty. Forget about being Vishwa Guru. We are more likely a Vishwa Kuli. We're doing all the dirty work, kuli work, labor intensive work for foreign companies, and they are becoming the Vishwa Gurus. They are the new East India Company type people, masters, and we are providing them labor and free big data and all that stuff. So the direction we are heading, if the train is heading in a direction, if it keeps going the way it currently is, we are heading for a serious problem. We are not becoming Vishwa Guru. We are actually heading for fragmentation, what I call breaking India 2.0. We are heading for that. But is there redemption? There is a chance of redemption, but it has to be done very quickly. There is not enough time to waste. We wasted far too much time. I don't even know where to go. I don't even know who has uh, whose ear I could talk to, because I've talked to all kind of people and nothing has come out. They listen and then they give the job to some person, some bureaucrat, some babu, or somebody from their organization who doesn't know what he's talking about to build up his career. They think that this is something anybody can do if you give him if what Rajiv has presented in his slides and in his report. If we just give it to some 5 people, they'll just do it. They don't realize that this requires a lot of hard work. It requires a long-term investment, a lot of experience, and so their unwillingness to bring expertise from the outside of their small group, their unwillingness to bring in senior expertise from the outside. And I'm not looking for money. I don't want a position. I don't want a title. I don't want any awards. I just want to have influence and guide people how to do it. I'm also not at a stage in life where I want to take charge and run things and all that. I don't want any budget. I don't want any of that official, administrative, institutional machinery being controlled by me, because I don't want to. But I have a lot of ideas. I want to influence people. I want to guide people. I want to direct people. And they are the ones who have to do this work. But there is no opportunity at this present time to do this kind of work, because the structures are very fixed, very political, very parochial, little groups here, little groups there, protecting their turf. So as long as this is the situation that continues, India is headed for disaster. It is not a 20-year, 30-year job. I'm saying by 2030, and I'm willing to stick my neck out and take this risk. By 2030, it will become clear that India's sovereignty is no longer secure. It will become clear in the next 9 years that some serious things are happening in a geopolitical level. China has a lot to do with it. Pakistan has a lot to do with it. Breaking India forces that are operating from India and outside have a lot to do with it. And these things are going to create havoc for India. And I'm very concerned about the youth. We have a huge population. A very large number of people could be affected. And this is what I lose sleep about. I lose sleep over this because India is very dear to me. My fellow Bharatiyas are very dear to me. I love them, and I'm very concerned for them because they're very innocent. I mean, they are bright people, and they haven't been given proper leadership and proper guidance. So this is the way I see things. There is hope, because wherever there is disruption and chaos and confusion, a smart guy can get ahead. And we have smart people, but we have not put them all together with the right resources.
Right. So let's see. And I hope as people are listening to this, and not only to you, there are also others who are saying, writing, expressing, and it is a very urgent situation which needs our immediate attention and responsibility. So, people who have asked this question to Rajiv ji about how they can contribute, so take this thing seriously, mature, and everybody, each person, each one of us has some skill, writing skills, research skills, whatever. So try to join in, try to get in touch through his website, through other lines, and to do your bit. Or we all have to do our bit as a Bharatiya, as patriots, as people aware citizens who do not only try to understand our story, our perspective, our present, but also the global view, the global perspective. In the end, Rajiv ji, just before we started this show, we were having an interesting talk on Bengalis. Bengalis, as you know, are very proud of their intellect. We have this famous statement by Tilak that what Bengal thinks today, India thinks tomorrow. Bengalis still love to quote this, though it is not the same anymore. Bengalis think much later nowadays. And we have been ruled by, not only politically, but also culturally and educationally, academic wise, by a kind of a strong leftist liberal narrative, which is still very strong, especially in the university campuses, in Kolkata streets, but different in suburbs, in the villages, in small towns where people are more receptive. But you have a long experience, uh, both with people across the world, with Indians of all hues and all types and all languages. So, what is your impression of Bengalis and Bengali intellect?
So, I'm a Punjabi. I was born in Ludhiana and raised in Delhi till 20, age of 20. And then I came to US. So I've lived here 50 years, but I always go back to India 4 times a year, except for during COVID. I haven't gone back, which is very sad. I lost my mother. I wish I'd be able to go back, and I will go back again. I'm exceedingly in touch with India. When I go to India, I don't just hang around my family. I go to all kind of corners of India. I have projects in all the different areas. I'm more connected with uh, uh, people in South India than almost any Punjabi friend of mine or most Delhi walas, because I believe in going out of my comfort zone and getting to meet other people. So I'm very well connected and, in touch with India. So I understand the West and I understand India, and I'm making sure that I have this uh, bifocal perspective. Now, given all this, I've asked myself the question: what what role does geography play in history, and what role does geography and history do they play in the mindset of people? So here is what I concluded, and I want my Bengali friends to reflect on it and write to me, tell me what they think of it. It's just a theory, and I often get in trouble because I have bold theories. But unless you are bold, a lot of Bengalis are very bold. Unless you are risk taking and take a bold step and come propose something, and then you can check it out, and if it's no good, you reject it. I mean, I'm always doing this kind of thing, and some people don't want me to. They just want you to say some safe things that they've already heard before, but that's not me. So I'm going to tell you something, provocative. I'm going to draw a comparison between the Punjabi and the Bengali. Now, that's something interesting. So my take is that the geography has influenced the two communities. The Punjab is land access from for invaders. They came, land invaders would come in through Punjab with, and the Calcutta and the arrival of the British was by boat, not land. So boat could carry 200 men, 300 men. Land, you could bring 10,000, 20,000 men on horses with cannons also. So you could bring huge amount of hard power. You could bring, land invader could bring a large amount of hard power. And if you don't have that hard power to defend, you're finished. They'll make slaves out of you, they'll wipe you out. like they did with Sindh and all these other places. They wiped them out. Punjab took them a very long time to get across Punjab, because Punjabis put up a fight. So the Punjabis put up a fight against the physical might of some of the most atrocious, fierce armies uh, in the world at that time. That was the foreign invaders that came from the Middle East. On the other hand, Bengal was not invaded by land armies in large numbers, and Bengal did not have to counter it with thousands and lakhs of army men fighting those guys for hundreds of years. The people who come by land, because they bring in large numbers, they can bring hard power and they can brutalize you. They can physically take control of everything, and they have a large number of their own people that they can bring because it's land. So Punjab had to counter that, and Punjabis became a product of this fighting spirit of a certain kind, and the kshatriyata, and the Sikhs became the keepers of that. The one, they became separated later, but they became the group that said, okay, we fight these guys. Bengal didn't have the problem and didn't have to come up with that solution. So what is the problem Bengal had, and what was its counter? Bengal had the problem that the British could bring only a very small number of people, and therefore they had to use cunning rather than brute force. The takeover of Bengal by the British was through cunning, not through brute force, because they never had more than a few thousand people. Englishmen were very small in number, but they were cunning. They had to rule over, hundreds of millions of Indians with the help of only a small number of British people, white people. How to do it? So they had to create an intermediary group. They had to create what became known as the Bhadralok, the Babus. They had to create the intermediaries to think like them, be like them, win them over, buy them out, give them all the frills, make them look like they are very important and good, give them good English skills, make them articulate, make them like Englishmen, pseudo Englishmen. They had to create this kind of intermediary in order to use them as the middlemen to rule over masses. So the rule of the British in India, in Bengal, was through Bengali intermediaries, because they needed to. The numbers were not enough when you're bringing by boat. Numbers are not enough of your own people to go rule. So the Bengali mind had to be molded to think like the British, to work like them, work under them, be crafty, be cunning, be clever. So the Bengali countering the British was also like the British in a sense. The Punjabi countering the Islamic invader had to be brutal like them. So you adopt some of the qualities of the enemy to fight him. If the enemy is a physical enemy, you become tough and fight him. If the enemy is a mental enemy, intellectual, cunning, manipulative, conniving, slippery, you have to become like that. So you have to become a very cunning fellow. You have to become like a kind of a slippery fellow. You have to say one thing, mean something else. So the Bengalis developed nuance, subtlety, multiple levels of perception, being able to say one thing here, one thing there, like, in the office wearing a British attire on top and dhoti in the bottom, kind of a Bengali adaptation. Punjabi never do that. Punjabi would say, okay, there's 10,000 those guys. They're going to finish us off. I got to go and get 10, 20, 30,000 of my guys, train them very quickly, learn all their fighting techniques, and go after them and beat the hell out of them. This sitting around and sitting here and wearing the mullah here and the dhoti pandit below is not going to cut it. Those guys are on horses. They're going to finish me off. So the Punjabi became more. Punjabi is less subtle than the Bengali. Bengalis got this quality. Therefore, poetry, art, music, science, all kind of knowledge which requires subtlety. The Punjabi got force, no nonsense, direct talk, be straight. So I find that a lot of times when I'm in discussion with my Bengali friends, they're going on talking, yeah, wahan, kya baat, kya bol rahe aap? Bole, yeah, I'm a Punjabi straightforward, tell me yes or no. What are you trying to say? Yes or no? And the guy, good, who, why, in between, intertwined, this one, that one, whoa, la, la. They got learned a lot of vocabulary, very gymnastic, intellectual, and all that. So they're very smart, but at the end of the day, also confused because they're not able to say, okay, that's the enemy, this is my solution, I'm going to go after them. Either they'll defeat me or I'll defeat them, but one way or the other. So the Punjabi is a product of his geography because the geography brought in a certain brutal enemy in very large numbers, and we had no, we couldn't fight the Muslim with soft power. We could not have gone there and say, I'm going to teach you yoga. Those guys not interested in that. They're out there to finish you off. So Bengal had the opportunity because they were firstly dealing with a more enlightened, scientifically educated British people than the Punjabi were dealing with brute force, unscientific, crude invaders. So the type of invader you're dealing with, you got to respond accordingly, and the type of invader the Bengali dealing with, they got to respond. So I think that the Punjabi character, Bengalis have to appreciate, and the Bengali character, the Punjabis have to appreciate. And this is a product of our geographies, which influence our histories. And the Punjabi is land based, flat land for thousands of miles all around, no mountains to hide like in Kashmir, you go hide in a cave or something. The enemy is coming. He's got so many tens of thousands of horsemen, and he's out there to slaughter you. He's done it before, and you better get up and fight. There is no such thing as nuance, and you negotiate and you become clever and you all of that stuff. No, Bengali had those opportunities. Bengalis, because they're dealing with smaller number of British people who were educated, who were nuanced, who knew about how to manipulate. So the Bengali could learn all those skills. So I think that these are two different kinds of minds that India has, and India needs both of them. India needs the Bengali mind, and India needs the Punjabi mind. And of course, India needs the Tamil mind and needs all the minds. We are very lucky. We got so many kinds of histories and geographies, and so many. We are product of so many different things that have happened in different parts of India. We need to learn to build teams of multi regional teams, and that is my statement about what I think of Bengalis. I think a lot of them, I want them to understand Punjabi, how the Punjabi works, why the Punjabi is a no nonsense fellow, straightforward fellow, because he's a product of that kind of a requirement, and why he's very impatient when he finds Bengali not able to figure out how to answer the straightforward question. Straightforward question, tell me yes, no, and I'll make a choice. But don't dance around here, there. Don't sort of make it very complicated and all that. So I think there is difference. There is difference between different regions of India, and the difference is a product of the geographies which shape their histories. So that's my that it's just a theory, and I'm willing to be debated and criticized and told what's wrong with it, and we can continue this at some point.
This is really wonderful, very fascinating and wonderful. And what you say about Bengalis, yes, we do also talk about it quite often about this the Bhadralok class and the Babu class that they created for their benefit. And also, it is from this class of intellectual, cultural Bengal that we managed to, find the Renaissance path or whatever. But this comparison that you made between Punjab and Bengal is something really new for us, and it's fascinating. And it's also very interesting, Rajiv ji, that it is these two regions that they cut off.
Yeah, yeah. They you see, that's a very interesting point. The partition of Bengal was very brutal, uh, which happened a lot earlier. The partition of Punjab was so bad. 2/3 of Punjab went to Pakistan. 2/3. Only 1/3 came to India. And Punjab is 5 rivers, but only two are left. Three were given to Punjab, to Pakistan, and the most mightiest of the 5 rivers, they all went to Pakistan. And this Indus water treaty, Nehru signed foolishly, in perpetuity, with no termination, no nothing we got in return, which says that these rivers, those 3 rivers go to Pakistan, even though they're coming through India, through Indian land, Indian Kashmir coming, and then going to Pakistan. We are not allowed to build dams. We're not allowed to use them because the water under the Indus Water Treaty has been given to Pakistan. They own that water. This is very strange. So the river Jhelum is so huge in terms of water. It's more than all the other rivers combined, and it belongs to Pakistan. So, you look at my ancestral town, my parents, father lived in Lahore. They were doing very well. They had all kind of stuff. They loved everything. So during the partition that the British created of Punjab, it was devastating for Punjab. Devastating. My family lost so much. Life of people, money, wealth, dignity, all of that. But we had to, the fighting spirit such that we did not end up in refugee camps like Kashmiri Pandits. We built ourselves up. Nobody, no international organization helping us, no Ma Baap coming, no government, this and that. Punjabis in the last 2-3 decades stood up entirely on their own after having been wiped out because of partition. So, we also have a fighting spirit, a resilience in us. But both Punjab and Bengal were treated in a brutal way in the manner the British arbitrarily and unfairly partitioned.
Thank you, Rajiv ji. This was really a wonderful, wonderful discussion, more than we really expected. We had heard from your team that you won't be able to give us more than 1.5 hours, and you're recovering after a major surgery, but you gave us the time, and this was a fantastic discussion, and you seem to be the prime form in spite of your health. And it's wonderful articulation. And many of our viewers are saying that we would like to see Rajiv ji back with us
Of
again
course,
soon.
you
Yes.
can bring me back. What you do is you can have a group of your own afterwards, and they can come up with questions and issues and counter proposals. And if you want to create a debate, we can have a debate where there'll be you can moderate. There could be 2-3 people, and they can ask me questions and I'll answer. Let's have fun. We are open-minded people, and we are all Bharatiyas in it together. I don't have all the answers, but I'm working very hard, and I need all the help. So anybody who want to offer concrete help, not Rajiv, you should do this. I don't need advice what I should do because we got so much to do. I need help. If you want to come and do it, I want that. If you say I'm willing to come and do this for you, that I want. So those who are interested can write to rajivmalhotra.com. And if you go to that website, rajivmalhotra.com, you will see contact. So you can hit contact and send a message. You can also follow me on YouTube. It's rajivmalhotra.official, and similarly on Facebook, rajivmalhotra.official. The Twitter is Rajiv Message, at Rajiv Message. I would love to interact with you, and thank you so much, Maharaj. This has been wonderful for me also.
Thank you so much, Rajiv ji. I will, I'll ask the viewers to share this video as much as possible on all platforms. And thank you for being with us. Thank you, Rajiv ji, for your time. I hope to be, yes, that's a very good idea, in fact, to have a debate of sorts where we welcome conflicting opinions and assemble things and find out conclusions, and also to try and do something instead of just despairing and thinking what could have happened. So let's make things happen. And thank you once again, Rajiv ji. Namaskar. And
Namaskar,
namaskar.
everybody. Everybody, namaskar. Thank you so much.